Episode number 279, Kingdom Innovation for a Brave New World, with Doug Paul, Part 1. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Well, hey guys, welcome to the podcast and welcome to 2021. We're praying that this year will be so much better than last year. At our ministry, we have lots of things planned, including the launch of a couple of brand new platforms that we are really excited about. We're producing more ready-made and custom media content than ever before, and we have some new training resources on the way this year as well. An exciting year for us is in store, and I hope the same is true for you at your church. Maybe you've hit a groove of how to do church online and your live worship experiences as well. Maybe you have some tools and resources that will help you make Sunday happen each weekend this year that you might not have had last year. On this week's episode of our show, I welcome Doug Paul. Doug is the author of Kingdom Innovation for a Brave New World. I'll talk to Doug about what the church looked like pre-COVID and what it can look like now, how we can innovate as we go forward as the church. We'll talk about 5 phases of kingdom innovation and more. That's all this week and next week on the podcast, as we'll do 2 straight weeks with Doug Paul. First, let's check the mailbag. All right, in the mailbag this week, I'll share 2 testimonies. First, my friend Matt McMorris shared a testimony in our Facebook group. He said, "I thought COVID might kill our church plant, but we have seen growth, new families, fresh and exciting spirit, new building being remodeled, 2 baptized recently. Our digital presence has improved as well, thanks in large part to you guys. God has blessed our church." Way to go, Matt. Way to go, dude. Good job. All right, my second testimony comes this week from Sarah McNulty from our Facebook group. Sarah says, "We have seen an incredibly encouraging giving situation in our church. More people engaged in giving, making ministry happen." Awesome. Love this encouragement. Matt, Sarah, way to go. I love hearing from you guys. You're welcome to email me directly, carl@1230.media, or you can find me on social media. Just share a testimony, and we will just put it right in line and share it right here on the show. All right, part 1 of my conversation with Doug Paul is coming up right after this. Check this out.
Wake up. Make it on time. Learn this. Post that. Work out. Go out. Repeat. Wake up. Make it on time. Learn this. Post that. Work out. Go out. Repeat. Wake up. Make it on time. Learn this. Post that. Work out. Go out. Repeat. Wake up. Make it on time. Learn this. Post that. Work out. Go out. Repeat. 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 Try. Wake up.
Pardon the noise. This is the sound of freedom. I'm free.
God evaluates life and purpose. You and I have one life to live. Only what we've done for God in Christ will last. Everything else is wood, hay, and stubble.
Jesus, our master, our savior, the hound of heaven, is chasing us down.
We should be creative.
Hey guys, today I welcome Doug Paul to the podcast. Doug works with Catapult, an innovation and activation shop that works with churches and other nonprofits. He serves as a pastor and elder at a church in Richmond, Virginia. He's also the author of Ready or Not, Kingdom Innovation for a Brave New World. Doug, welcome, man. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be on.
Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate your time. So you are a former pastor turned, I have in my notes here that the term is kingdom innovator. So tell me what that term means and kind of the transition from working as a pastor to working with pastors all around the world.
So, I mean, I think some context is helpful in that I don't know that I would say I'm a former pastor, but some of that has to do with my calling. When I became a Christian in my early 20s, I just started starting things because the churches that I was at weren't able to really reach my friends. And the people I'd grown up who had gone to church had all left the church. Not all, but most had. And so what it's ended up happening over the last 17 years is there have been times when I've been a full-time pastor, and then there have been times when I've done other things. There have been times when I've gone back to full-time pastoring for 3 or 4 years, and then I've scaled back. And somewhere along the way, one of the things that I figured out was that I was really good with helping leaders figure out how to do innovation. And so that's currently where my full-time job is. I'm an innovation strategist, but I still work a day a week with our local church here in in Richmond, Virginia, in a really, really poor neighborhood. So that's awesome. Kind of, it's less about am I a pastor or not, and how many hours a week am I giving? I'm always going to be a pastor, but we'll see.
So we work with a lot of churches and ministries, and kind of what I see, and I'd love your opinion on this, is that the church usually is a few years behind in innovation and technology. I mean, there are churches that are kind of cutting edge and out there. I've worked for a couple of them that are kind of instead of looking at other churches, like I worked for New Spring Church in South Carolina, and one thing that we would do is instead of looking at, what did Elevation do, what did Church on the Move do, we would go and all go to a Bruno Mars concert or something like that, and go, okay, what is he doing, and what are people doing in the market? And so where do you feel that the church is as it relates to innovation and technology?
I think we're not in a great place, if I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, one of the reasons for this book that I wrote is one of the things that's happened that I think has gone under the radar, and I think it's not going to go under the radar much longer, is that culture is reinventing itself at the rate of every 18 months. It used to be every 20 to 30 years. And in the last 10 years, it's gone from doing it every 20 to 30 years to every 18 months. And so that means if you're quote, few years behind, imagine that you're now 60 years behind for what it is that's going to connect with people. And so I think that's a big paradigm shift that really has to hit people, and you have to absorb that and understand how different culture is right now than what it was when you were thinking about it in the early aughts or 2010 and building things out.
What does that mean as far as technology goes? So sometimes I walk in a church and they're struggling with, should we have a screen or not? I'm like, guys, oh my goodness. Are we 1993 here? I mean, let's go. And so what do you see? Kind of give me a state of the culture here on how far behind as a whole you think churches are.
I mean, I think you'll probably see that because of the seeker-sensitive movement and the church growth movement, you've probably got, let's say, 50, 60% of churches are trying to move in a somewhat forward direction as it relates to technology. Now, that's on a continuum. I mean, you've got some that are like, maybe you're representing the front edge of that, and you've got others that are, they just put in a screen 3 years ago or whatever it might be.
Right.
But then you've got the other half who, there's still pews and hymnals and the whole thing. And I think to some degree, like, it is helpful to remember, like, technology is not the end in and of itself. People connecting to the Lord is the in and of itself. And so if you've got a group of people that are really like, we don't want to move in that general direction with technology, I mean, like, I guess that's your choice. That's fine. But then you have to say, like, okay, who are people who are like us then that we could reach?
Right.
And just don't expect someone who is 19 to probably be that open.
Right. Exactly. If you're a church that's reaching 50 and above, be that church. Don't try to necessarily be something that you're not. Yeah, I agree with that. All right. You've written a book that I mentioned called Ready or Not, Kingdom Innovation for a Brave New World. Tell me a little bit about how the book came to you and why you wrote it, a little bit of an overview for us.
Yeah, so I started the book 3 years ago. It's been a long project where I was trying to put on paper what it is that we were walking leaders through. How it was that we were able to help leaders find really unique innovations in ministry and then scale it. And at the very beginning, I decided I didn't want to write a how-to book specifically. I wanted it to be more like a Malcolm Gladwell book, where people come to discover the truth about things through really great storytelling, which requires unbelievable amounts of research. And I mean, like actually finding compelling stories that like crisscross and intersect with each other. And so I had, when COVID hit in March, I had about 95% of it done. And we decided to fast track it with the publisher. Instead of doing the normal 15 to 18 months, everyone was getting, everyone's having to adapt real quick. And so we decided to put it on a 6-month fast track. So we were able to get it out pretty quickly, but I will never get those 7 months of my life back.
Yeah, I bet. All right. So let's kind of dive into to the content of the book a little bit. How would you describe the state of the church in America pre-COVID, and how does that kind of segue into how you started the book?
I mean, the state of the church pre-COVID is in a state of denial about how, like where it is at within culture. It is no longer in the center of culture, and I think the state of denial is coming from a belief that we're going to get back there, like we're going to get back to that we are going to be like the thing that everything else orbits around. That ship has sailed. And I think in many ways, the sooner we come to embrace that reality, the sooner we're going to be able to see two things happen. Number one, we will hopefully be able to stop the like rapid decline that we're seeing that's happening generationally. And then secondly, like we'll actually understand that we have a giant gaping evangelism opportunity for us. There are people who have never been more open to the gospel than they are right now because they've never actually heard it. We just in some ways think that people have heard it. They've not heard it. And so I'm actually excited about the future. I'm excited about the opportunities that are in front of us, but it's going to be really hard for us to move there unless we don't own where the church is at.
In the book, you talk about how crisis situations have led to innovation. Can you give me some examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you, like, in some ways, like some of the best innovations that we find, particularly when you think about social innovations, happen just because there's a need. Mm-hmm. And so Bill Wilson, he just needed to stop drinking. Like he was offered an opportunity to be apprenticed by Thomas Edison. He was going to be the next great American inventor. And he never wrote Thomas Edison back to accept the apprenticeship because he was on a 3-month bender with this cocktail called the Bronx Bomber. And he never stopped drinking virtually morning, noon, or night for 14 straight years. And so for him, he wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to go invent Alcoholics Anonymous. He didn't have a vision in his mind that 100 years later, 130 million people are going to be in this thing as it scaled up. He just wanted to stop drinking. And I think that's an important principle that we see is oftentimes the best innovations start in the laboratory of our own life. It's like right in front of us. It's at our living room table. It's not some big thing with hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It's like, hey, you need breakthrough around this one thing. And maybe God will scale that and help that multiply and spread.
Good. All right. Walk me through. So in the book, you talk about 5 components of kingdom innovation. I want to walk through each of these. So there's kind of the phases of kingdom innovation. The first one is identification. Walk me through that one.
Well, this is it sounds really rudimentary, but it's actually saying, starting with the right questions and framing the innovation that we need. So oftentimes, for instance, like churches will be like, look, our small groups aren't working the way that we want them to. And so the question that they ask is, how do we fix our small groups? But actually, like the identification phase is saying, like, that's actually the wrong question. The right question is, why did we start small groups in the first place? What was the problem small groups were trying to fix? Or maybe even worse, we started small groups and we don't even know why. Because everyone else was doing it, because we didn't think about it. Like, that's just what we've always done. Those are actually really bad reasons to start something. And so the first phase is starting with the big why questions. You know, Simon Sinek, he talks about like, start with why.
Start with why.
Like, why do we need this innovation? And if we can frame it correctly with the outcomes that we need, then we can start building towards some of the next phases that we've got with innovation.
Okay, so identification moves to ideation. Walk me through that one.
Yeah, with ideation, it's thinking through, all right, if we now know the innovation that we're going after, how do we get there? What are the things that are going to be happening? What are new paradigms or practices or principles that need to be at work that maybe haven't even existed before? Like, we're going to be figuring those things out. And at the ideation section, it's saying, like, look, the more that we know about something, it's called the curse of knowledge. The more that we know about something, the higher our experience or expertise, the harder it is for us to see other ways of doing it. And so one of the key things about the curse of knowledge is that we have got to figure out ways to bring people into the conversation, to bring people into that ideation phase that allow us to see other ways of doing it, because all we can see is what we already know. Adam Grant talks about how, like, our prototypes become our own prisons for thinking about new ways of doing things.
So you would suggest bringing in, like if I'm doing a creative meeting or whatever, bring in some people that are not in my, initial small sphere. Walk me through practical. What does that mean? How do I get out ideas from outside my bubble?
Well, I think there are people that you can bring into it, but there are also things that you can do that can really help out. So I'll give you an example. We've got an innovation lab that we do with Catapult, where we help churches build disciple-making vehicles that can multiply really rapidly. And so what we'll have them do is we call it, I don't know, I think it's funny. Some people might think it's lewd. Who knows? We call it the love child exercise, where we have them pick 2 different disciple-making vehicles or models that they've always really liked. So let's say it's a traditional small group, and it's going to, I'm pulling one from, like, experiencing God, or it could be, it doesn't matter what it is. And it's saying, like, look, if these 2 were to have a love child, if they got together and had a kid, what would that discipleship vehicle look like? And in some ways, the more random you can do it, the better, because what it's going to force you to do in just this very safe setting is imagine new ways of doing it that you hadn't thought of before. And it doesn't matter if you do it or not. It's stretching what you're able to do. Because I think the problem is, usually when we think about coming up with ideas, it usually means, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get a whiteboard and we're going to brainstorm. And there's nothing wrong with brainstorming. It's just that brainstorming can only do a certain number of things. But there are actually practices that we can learn to do. There are people we can bring into conversations that will help us see things very differently.
All right. So ideation moves to experimentation.
Yeah, it's the most skipped one. What leaders tend to do, particularly Christian leaders, is if they have an idea that they like, what they do is they take that idea and they put it right on their heart. And they're like, this is an expression of, like, my true core self. And I know it's going to work. And so they don't actually pilot it. They don't put a beta out. They don't try it on a small scale. They scale it all the way up. And so if it's a new program, it's like, hey, why don't we, instead of saying, like, let's try this with 10 people and see if it does what we think we're going to do, we'll scale it up to 1,000 and be like, of course it's going to work. And then when it doesn't, it doesn't work the way they think that it's going to, they're like, man, that didn't work. It's like, well, maybe the first time it didn't work, but we keep experimenting and iterating on it until we figure out how to get it to do what it is. Then we scale it.
Can you tell me about a church that you guys have worked with that have walked through this process?
Yeah, I'm working with one right now that's actually in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Yeah. And they're in the process of building a brand new discipleship model it's going to help people grow really, really deeply spiritually, but it's also going to be highly evangelistic. And so I've been working with them for about 8 months right now. And 6 weeks ago, they just launched out 3 new groups. And they've got a bunch of groups, but they're only starting with 3 to pilot it out for 3 months. And they're already learning things where they're like, oh, that did work the way that we thought it did in our minds that it would. And then there were other times where like, oh, crap, like that thing there, that did not work the way that we thought it was going to. And so they're able to adjust it so that when they hit the spring, they're going to be able to scale it. And it's going to be able to go to the leaders. And then by next fall, it's going to be in the water of the entire church. So that's it, just in terms of like real time. That's what we're doing with Salem Chapel right now.
Introducing monthly custom media plans from 1230 Media. Affordable, no-contract monthly plans for custom graphic design and video for your church. Custom sermon series designs, announcement graphics, social media graphics, sermon bumpers and trailers, promotional videos, countdowns, church announcement videos, and more. Choose between custom graphics, custom video, or graphics and video plans. Harness the power of a full creative team every month to serve your church or ministry, with plans starting at only $600 per month. Join hundreds of churches using 1230 Media to transform your worship experience. Get started today at 1230.media/pricing. That's 1230.media/pricing. The show notes for this episode are available now at MAKINGSUNDAYHAPPEN.com.
Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us on the show this week. Next week, we will continue my conversation with Doug Paul all about kingdom innovation and new ways that we can reach people with the gospel this year. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit MAKINGSUNDAYHAPPEN.com.